The night was dark and moonless as four friends, Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Jake, decided to embark on an adventure. Their destination was the old cemetery that had been the talk of their small town for generations. It was said that eerie things happened there after dark, and the brave four wanted to see if the stories were true. As they approached the rusty iron gates of the cemetery, Sarah shivered, pulling her coat tight around her. "Are we sure about this, guys?" she asked, her voice quivering. Mark, the boldest of the group, chuckled. "Come on, Sarah, don't be such a scaredy cat. It's just a bunch of old graves." Emily nodded, trying to reassure her friend. "Yeah, Sarah, nothing to worry about. We're here to have some spooky fun." Jake, who had brought a flashlight, lit up the path leading into the cemetery. The group ventured further, the crunch of leaves beneath their feet, the only sound in the eerie silence. As they wandered among the tombstones, the atmosphere grew more and more unsettling. The wind whispered through the trees and shadows danced across the graves. Suddenly, Emily gasped and pointed at something in the distance. "Look," she said in a hushed voice. "Over there." The others turned to see what had caught her attention. In the dim light, they could make out a statue of a woman standing by a tombstone. It was so lifelike that it sent chills down their spines. "Wow, that's creepy," Mark whispered, taking a step closer to get a better look. As they approached the statue, they noticed its features were remarkably detailed. The woman's eyes, in particular, were unsettlingly lifelike, as if they were watching their every move. Jake, always the skeptic, reached out and touched the statue's cold stone hand. "It's just a statue, guys, no need to freak out." But just as he said that, the statue's eyes blinked, and it turned its head to look at them. The friends screamed in terror and stumbled backward, tripping over each other in their haste to get away. They ran through the cemetery, their hearts pounding, not daring to look back. They didn't stop until they were safely outside the rusty gates, gasping for breath. What was that?" Sarah panted, her face pale as a ghost. "I have no idea," Mark replied, his bravado completely gone. Emily was trembling as she spoke. That was impossible. Statues don't move." Jake, still holding the flashlight, glanced back at the cemetery. "I think we should go back and check. Maybe it was just our imagination." But the others vehemently disagreed. "No way," Sarah said. "I never want to see that place again." They walked home in silence, their nerves on edge, unable to shake the feeling that they had witnessed something truly unnatural. Over the next few days, the friends couldn't stop thinking about the cemetery and the mysterious statue. They decided to do some research to find out if there was any history behind it. In the town's dusty old library, they found a book about the cemetery's history. It mentioned that the statue was rumored to be a memorial to a young woman who had died tragically in a fire many years ago. Her death had been a local legend, and people said her spirit haunted the cemetery. The more they read, the more convinced they became that the statue was more than just a piece of stone. It was a vessel for the restless spirit of the woman who had died so long ago. One evening, fueled by curiosity and a desire to confront their fear, the four friends returned to the cemetery. This time, they brought offerings of flowers and lit candles at the base of the statue. "We come in peace," Emily said softly, her voice trembling. "We mean no harm. If there's anything you want to tell us, please do." They waited in silence, their hearts pounding, unsure of what to expect. Suddenly, a soft, ghostly voice seemed to whisper on the wind, "Help me." The friends exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked. They all nodded, and without a word they began digging around the base of the statue. As they dug, they unearthed a small metal box. Inside, they found a collection of letters written by the young woman who had died in the fire. The letters told a heartbreaking story of a love that had been torn apart by tragedy. The woman had been engaged to a man who had perished in the same fire that had claimed her life. She had never had the chance to say goodbye. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the final letter. "I want to be with him," the woman had written. "Please, let me be with him." The friends knew what they had to do. They gathered the letters and returned to the cemetery, placing them at the base of the statue. "You can be with him now," Jake said softly. As they watched, the statue's eyes closed and it seemed to sigh in relief. Then, with a soft, ethereal glow, it slowly faded away, leaving only the tombstone behind. The friends left the cemetery that night with a sense of closure, knowing that they had helped a lost soul find peace. They never spoke of the experience to anyone else, but they knew that some mysteries were best left buried. From that day on, the old cemetery seemed a little less eerie, and the four friends had a newfound appreciation for the power of the unknown. They had learned that sometimes, even in the darkest of places, there could be a glimmer of hope and redemption. In a quiet old town nestled between rolling hills, there lay a cemetery unlike any other. It wasn't just the history that made it unique, but rather the legend that had shrouded it for generations. The cemetery was known for its centuries-old tombstones and gnarled trees that reached towards the heavens as if pleading for release from their earthly roots. The townsfolk rarely visited, save for the occasional historian or curious soul. The legend that sent shivers down the spines of those who lived nearby was that of the phantom mourner. On moonlit nights, some claimed to have witnessed a cloaked figure standing by a particular grave. It was said that the mourner appeared as if from thin air, silently weeping for someone long gone. One cool autumn evening, Sarah, a young woman with a curious spirit, decided to investigate the legend. She had heard tales of the phantom mourner since childhood, and felt an inexplicable draw to the mystery. As the moon cast a silver glow over the cemetery, she ventured into the unsettling realm of the graveyard. Sarah's footsteps crunched on the gravel path as she moved deeper into the cemetery's heart. The tombstones, etched with names and dates long forgotten, loomed like silent guardians of the past. Her heart raced, but her curiosity propelled her forward. At last, she reached the grave that was said to be the phantom mourner's haunt. The tombstone was weathered and cracked, its inscription nearly illegible. Sarah shivered in the cold night air and strained her eyes, trying to make out the name. Then, as if summoned by her presence, a gust of wind rustled the trees, and a shadowy figure materialized before her. The cloaked mourner stood there, head bowed, draped in a tattered shroud that seemed to blend seamlessly with the night. Fear surged through Sarah's veins, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from the eerie sight. She watched in silence as the mourner slowly raised an ethereal hand to touch the tombstone. His fingers caressed the letters of the name, and a mournful sigh escaped his lips, chilling the air around her. As Sarah observed, the mourner's form flickered like a candle in the wind, his translucent figure becoming even more ghostly. Tears shimmered in his eyes, and he seemed lost in an eternal grief. She wondered who this spirit mourned so deeply and why he was bound to this place. Summoning her courage, Sarah whispered, "Who are you? Why do you weep for so long?" The mourner's head turned slightly towards her, though his face remained hidden in the shadows of his hood. His voice was a haunting whisper, barely audible but laden with sorrow. "I mourn a love lost to time, a heartache that knows no end. I am bound to this grave, for my sorrow is my only companion." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for the mournful spirit. She took a step closer, her empathy overriding her fear. "Is there no way to find peace? To move on from your grief?" The mourner's form wavered as if contemplating her words. "Peace eludes me, for my love is entwined with this place. I can never leave the one I mourn." Sarah's heart ached for the phantom mourner. She wished she could help him find solace, but she knew not how. As she pondered, a soft breeze ruffled her hair, and the mourner's figure became even fainter, as if the night itself was swallowing him. Desperation filled the mourner's voice as he whispered, "Tell my tale, dear mortal. Let the world know of my undying love and eternal sorrow. Perhaps in the telling, I will find the release I seek." Sarah nodded solemnly, promising to share his story with the living. As the mourner's form dissipated into the moonlit night, she knew that she had stumbled upon a tale that would send chills down the spines of those who heard it. From that night onward, Sarah became the keeper of the legend, recounting the haunting story of the phantom mourner to anyone who would listen. The town's people, once fearful, now visited the cemetery with a sense of reverence, acknowledging the love and sorrow that bound the mournful spirit to that hallowed ground. And so, the legend of the phantom mourner lived on, a reminder that even in death, love and grief could transcend the boundaries of time and touch the hearts of those who dared to listen to its ghostly whisper in the moonlight. The moon hung high in the inky night sky, casting an eerie glow over the old cemetery. A dense fog rolled in, shrouding the gravestones in an otherworldly mist. It was a place where the living rarely ventured, and for good reason. The Harrison family had lived in the small town of Ravenswood for generations. They were proud of their history, but one part of that history they rarely spoke of was the Harrison family cemetery. It was hidden deep within the woods, away from prying eyes, and had been all but forgotten. One crisp autumn morning, young Timmy Harrison stumbled upon a weathered map in the attic of his family's centuries-old farmhouse. The map showed the way to the hidden family cemetery. Curiosity piqued, Timmy decided to embark on an adventure. He believed that by finding the cemetery, he could uncover secrets about his family's past. As Timmy ventured into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around him, creating an ominous tunnel. Leaves crunched beneath his sneakers, and the wind whispered through the branches like a spectral choir. He followed the map's directions, navigating through twists and turns until he arrived at the cemetery's entrance. The iron gate creaked open, revealing a forgotten world. Moss-covered tombstones, some leaning at precarious angles, stretched out before him. Timmy shivered as he entered the eerie cemetery. He felt as if the eyes of the departed were watching his every move. The first grave he came across belonged to his great-grandfather, Henry Harrison. The tombstone was weathered, and the inscription was barely legible. Timmy ran his fingers over the carved letters, trying to make out the words. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing his lantern. Timmy's heart raced as he fumbled to relight it. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Timmy pressed on, determined to uncover more about his family's history. As he moved deeper into the cemetery, the fog thickened and the darkness intensified. The moon was obscured by heavy clouds, leaving him with only his lantern's feeble light to guide the way. Then, he stumbled upon a tombstone that sent a chill down his spine. It bore the name Eleanor Harrison, his grandmother who had passed away when he was just a child. But what unnerved him was the date of death. It read, October 3rd, 2023. Timmy's heart pounded in his chest. Today's date was also October 3rd, 2023. Fear gnawed at him, but he couldn't resist the compulsion to explore further. He came across more graves with current dates of death, all belonging to his family members. Panic set in, and Timmy began to run, but it felt as though he was running in circles, unable to find the exit. Just when he thought he was trapped, a voice echoed through the fog. "Timmy," it whispered, a soft and mournful sound. He froze, his heart racing. "Timmy, come closer," the voice beckoned. Hesitant but drawn by an irresistible force, Timmy followed the voice to a towering crypt at the center of the cemetery. The crypt's heavy stone door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit chamber within. Shadows danced on the walls as Timmy stepped inside. There, he saw a sight that would haunt his nightmares for years to come. His family members, all dressed in tattered burial clothes, stood in a circle around a dark altar. Their eyes were empty voids, devoid of life, and they chanted in an eerie, monotone chorus. "Timmy, you've returned," his grandmother Eleanor intoned, her voice hollow and distant. "Join us, and your fate will be sealed." Timmy's breath caught in his throat as realization struck him. This place was cursed, and the date on the tombstones was no coincidence. It was a trap, a way to lure the living into the clutches of the dead. As the chanting grew louder, Timmy turned to flee, but the stone door slammed shut, sealing him inside the crypt. Panic washed over him, and he pounded on the door, screaming for release. The chanting reached a deafening crescendo, and the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a bright light pierced the darkness. It was the lantern he had dropped earlier. Timmy snatched it up and shone it at the altar, where the spectral figures of his family writhed in agony. The light seemed to weaken them, their ghostly forms dissipating like smoke. Desperate, Timmy chanted words he had found on an old parchment in the attic, words meant to banish malevolent spirits. The room shook, and the figures howled in torment. With a final burst of light, they vanished, leaving only empty darkness behind. The stone door slowly creaked open, and Timmy stumbled out of the crypt, gasping for breath. He had escaped the clutches of the cursed cemetery, but he knew he would never forget the horror he had witnessed. As he made his way back through the mist-shrouded graveyard, he couldn't help but look back one last time.